clock there because I think that's our timing, but we started recording, yeah? Okay. In that case, Catherine, apologies, please.
Yeah, apologies received from CFO Finn Monaghan and Kate Harvard from Audit Wales.
Thank you. Declarations of interest. I don't have any. Are there any others? No? Okay, thank you. So my announcement, please, would give me great pleasure to note the permanent appointments of Dean Loader and Brian Thompson to help to ensure we have the leadership necessary to guide us through the challenges ahead as we continue on this path of change. With a strong executive leadership team, South Wales Fire and Rescue Service will have the resource it needs to provide the clarity, stability and support to build on the progress we've made and deliver the highest standards of service that our communities deserve. So congratulations both.
Thank you.
We look forward to moving mountains ahead. Okay, so point 4 on the agenda, the minutes from the 20th of September, page 3 of your pack. Are there any notes or clarification or issues from those minutes, please?
Not from me. No.
No? Okay, then I move that they're approved as a true record. And let's have a look at outstanding issues. No items to be discussed. Agenda item 5. None. Thank you. Right, let's go straight into the report for decision. Agenda item number 6. Lisa.
So this is the second capital monitoring report for this financial year. And at this point, we just comment on the difference between previous reports. So it's the movement between the last and this, and that was the 20th of September. So overall, this is a game of two halves, the capital monitoring report. The first bit is discussing spend and how that's changed and altered. And the second bit is about talking about how that change has been financed. So in terms of the spend portion, there's a £405,000 reduction in forecast overall. So we've gone from 11.7 million down to 11.3. This has arisen from £600,000 less in property, and there's 4 main projects that contribute to that change. There's £1 million less, just over £1,038,000 less spend for new in, and the reasons for that is set out in the paragraphs there. There's £350,000 less for electric vehicle charging infrastructure. And there's 260 more for the on-call duty system package of works that we are currently operating. That affects potentially 10 stations across the piece. There's a smaller variance between last report and this on Penarth, and that's just due to planning and delays there for that project. So moving on to the vehicle replacement programme, a smaller change there. There's £58,000 more than last reported, and there's a lot of over and under spends. There's a lot of over and under spends adding up to that, but the main driver of this change is in the grant funded section of the vehicle replacement programme. So there's £440,000 more dedicated to purchase of prime movers. And this is supported through the loss of funding for the USAR box lorry and also the dim light vehicle of 90,000. In addition to that, there's £200,000 less being spent on water carriers, and the rationale is there in terms of that's not being lost, but it is being pushed forward into next year. It's going through a tender process. Commissioners will be minded that it's a difficult market to try and get what we want in terms of that facility, and also 99,000 on less on motor ladders. So all those overs and unders come back to a net £58,000 more reported than last time. There's no change in the equipment or ICT infrastructure headings since previously reported, but there is a £110,000 increase on the joint public sector centre control facility that we have, and that is all tied up with a 2 to 3 year project on changing the command and control systems down there, and that increases split 50-50 with SM Mid and West as part of the cost sharing arrangement. So that's the spending piece. Moving on to the financing piece. We've got £29,000 more in capital receipts. We've got £508,000 more in grants, and that ties back to the vehicle replacement programme that I just referred to, additional funding there. There's 55,000 more for Mid and West contributions, just linked to that joint public centre service centre arrangement I just referred to. And those things add up to just under 600,000 of more financing. And what that has done for us is reduced our borrowing need by just under £1 million, 998,000. So you will see at the bottom that financing requirement is less than before. And the recommendation is for commissioners to note how the overspends are being funded through underspends, additional grants and reprioritisation, and to note the movement in schemes in spend and financing.
Lisa, thank you. It's kind of par for the course at this point in the financial year, where it's moving bits of the jigsaw around, isn't it? So if I can go back in a little bit more detail.
Yep.
So if we pick up on property, point 2, with New Inn, it says in the report demolition on the main site will commence on the 18th of November. Have we got any progress on that?
Yeah, Mike, do you want to provide?
Yeah,
an update?
so they have mobilised on site there now. They've done the soft strip of the station, so they've taken out everything they can to date. Asbestos removal has been completed as of yesterday. In terms of the actual demolition of the building, there's been a slight delay on that. So NRW have requested some further testing yesterday afternoon. So there's a little bit of work to do there, but that's been actioned. So we're hoping that that building will be dropped early in January.
Were NRW late in getting back to us?
NRW were late in coming back to us.
Why did I know that?
Yeah, there's a bit of.
I've had a lot to do with them over the years.
Yeah, we're trying to we have established a contact within NRW at the moment that we're working with to try and push things along. So things are looking positive for us there. But
Okay. Well, as chair of this committee, I am concerned that NRW were late in getting back to us. So I'd like an action point to be that I'd like my concerns reported to NRW because that has caused us a delay in this work. Okay, so if we can, somebody can sort out a letter for me and then I'll check it before it's sent because they need to know that people are looking at them.
Yep.
Okay.
I'll provide the information for that.
Thank you.
So just to provide some additional information on that, Lady Wilcox, is that delay will be costing us money on a weekly front now.
And they need to know that. And that needs to be in a public record.
What is the broad cost of that, Mike?
At the moment, the demobilisation costs are looking around 15,000.
Well,
A week altogether?
No, altogether.
it's a significant amount of money
It is.
Yeah.
because of their.
I believe this is wrapped up in the planning application for the sustainable drainage.
This was one of the conditions on the planning. So that report would have gone to them probably, I would imagine, around the beginning of October. So if there was any issues, you would have expected a response long before when we were mobilising.
Okay, well, I want all that factored in, okay,
Yep.
as I write to express my disappointment, and this is not an extra cost for us. Okay, needs to be there. And following on from that, in terms of the Penarth station, so construction could potentially commence summer 2025. Planning, regulation, how, what's happening with Vale of Glamorgan Council, what's going on here?
So we've had a brief discussion on this previously. Planning hasn't been submitted because plans have not reached a point with the authority where they are happy to proceed. So there's no point in proceeding to full planning permission until there's an agreement in principle on the designs
Yeah.
of the site.
I get what
Yeah.
planning does.
So I think that we've been waiting for a long time for them to feed back.
Yeah, so I met with the planners from Vale about 3 weeks ago on site there just to walk around to try and explain more.
Sorry to cut across you. Can you remind them when you meet with them?
Yeah.
That Vale of Glamorgan is one of our funders, so they're only holding up their own funding.
Okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
just remind them, they're one of the 10 funders, so, you know, they should be working in a much more integrated way.
Yeah.
Than they are.
So,
Because, you know, if I need to write to the leader, I'll write to the leader.
okay, we have come to a compromise on the design there now that they seem quite positive with, and they've asked us to submit the full pre-application, which we're in the process of doing now. So
Okay. I just wonder whether some of these people understand the joined up nature of this service.
yeah, it's an ongoing battle for us, to be honest, with planning committees and so on. That we don't seem to have any clout there in terms of pushing
Oh, we
things.
do. I can assure you we have clout.
Okay.
Okay. But what they need to understand is that they are holding up their own money. They're holding up their own process. They're holding up their own service. They fund us. And that doesn't always happen in separate departments of local authorities. So they're looking at South Wales Fire Service in one context and not thinking about actually, you know, we fund you.
Yeah.
I understand your concerns with trying to deal with planning officers and planning committees.
Yeah.
Because I've dealt with them.
Yeah, it's
Very
a bit of a balancing act on our part that we don't want to put too much pressure on them. Then they become despondent to us then. So
Yeah, well, but they shouldn't.
No.
And if they are, I'll bring the leader and tell her. It's frustrating when everybody's trying to do their job, you know, so I share your concerns, but what you have to understand as well, that you've got plenty of clout back here, all right, for us to
Yep.
deal with it. More than ever. Okay, so that's ongoing. The Gilbert Grove station is complete. The work at Ferndale is due to be completed in November. So what's the update on that then? In Ferndale?
so that's complete.
It's complete now, isn't it?
And handed back. Our station staff are back on site.
We'd be looking for an opening on that, Lady Wilcox.
Pardon?
We'd be looking for an official
Okay.
opening on that,
Yeah, good.
as we
Good.
did in Fiorki.
Well, that was my next point, because in the next paragraph, it said the Treorchy station asbestos, but that was opened recently, so that's been
Yeah.
done, isn't it?
Done.
With I think the mayor was there as well,
Yes,
yeah, and the chief.
there was a
and-
local councillor, not Andrew Morgan.
No, well, he's far too busy, see,
Yeah.
he's far too busy going on telly, talking about all the flooding in Pontypridd, which is quite awful, actually, but there we are. And NRW late again in letting people know about the change in the weather forecast, apparently. Anyway, Cardiff Gate decontamination project. The forecast has decreased, but a result of more accurate costings. But may it rise again? Because in my experience, things never go down.
So this is the first part of a bigger project. So this is to get a temporary provision in place for them in Cardiff Gate.
Okay.
So that's what this relates to. It's the undercover arrangements so that crews can go in and change, and they've got dirty and clean areas. So this is almost a precursor to the actual construction of the final facility.
Okay. Okay.
So that's it for this year alone, but that project will continue for potentially the next 3 years.
Yes, longer term, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay, just on the vehicle replacement program, the vehicles which are wholly grant funded. So is that Welsh Government grant?
Yes.
Good, good. Right. The next point that I'd like to pick up is 3.2, community and environment. Capital budget facilitates investment in long-term assets. Need to be planned sustainably to support current and future service delivery. So does that mean a review? And if so, when?
That's a general comment in terms of the impacts of investing in our capital assets.
Right. Okay. So we don't review or
We would be reviewing. I think the plan is to review. We are waiting for HMI CFRS report to see what they are recommending our
Okay.
next action as a services.
Okay, 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 good, thank you. Yeah, I think those are my main notes and my main queries on this. Is there anything else that anyone else has to add, please? No? In that case, we note the progress of the capital schemes, thank the people who are involved in this, and approve the alterations identified in Appendix 1, note the associated movements in funding, and I'm sure we'll have associated movements next time, so I thought we up and down.
Usually.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so let's move on to item 7, budget setting proposal. Lisa, do you want to talk us through this, please?
Okay. So, as commissioners will probably be aware, it's their responsibility to approve the budget and set the fire levy for the forthcoming year, ensuring that the budget supports operational need and also statutory obligations. So my part in this, in terms of drafting this report, has been to advise commissioners on financial matters, to prepare budget proposals, which are the basis for this report, and ensure compliance, and just generally ensure that the budget is robust. So this report sets the scene for consultation, and it covers initially some bits on governance arrangements for proposing that annual budget. So it's got some legal requirements, some audit requirements coming out of there. It also includes some contextual information in terms of how and when there is certainty in terms of budgets. And unfortunately for us, you can see per the Welsh Government timetable, we go first in setting our budget.
Yes.
So we're assuming a position for our local authority funders. It also covers some risks in terms of uncertainty presented by inflation and also change programmes for improvement. And so the report goes on to talk about the potential local government settlement, and you can see there I've highlighted 4.3%. I've made reference there to the council tax and what that overall funding position could look like at 4.7. That does not include any further settlements through supplementary budgets, which often occur throughout the year and will occur in respect of national insurance funding. So in that part, the local government settlement goes on to talk about our grant position. There's uncertainty and risk that this presents to us, and it gives some history on big movements for us in the past. And how we depend on those things.
Yes.
So in terms of base budget considerations, I run through from top to bottom our budget. So starting with the employee related budget and the impact of inflation on pay and pay awards, the impact of the autumn statement on national insurance, and we know that added 1.7 million to our base budget. I go on to talk about the contracts generally and what the increases are in those individual areas and the cost pressures. This culminates in comment about the capital investment and utilisation of reserves for key projects to ensure delivery and reduce financing costs. And the things that I've picked off to a fund there in discussion with officers has been the green elements in our reserves. We will have earmarked reserves for sustainability, for change, and other bits and pieces there. So we're covering off the contamination project, we're covering off the green premium renewing, and also our quality, diversity and inclusion works to property. It goes on to talk about the rationale for the initial budget draft, and that came in at 8.5%, further to our discussions. So some work was undertaken to try and drive that down and rationalise the budget. 2.7 of efficiencies were made, and this is set out in the bullet points that follow on from that. And that's part of the story, is using reserves to be able to ensure some continuity there and smoothing of the peaks and troughs of technical refreshes and things like frontline equipment. The report goes on to talk about consultation with our funders. So our local authorities, a recurring theme in past consultations has always been about the availability and use of our reserves to mitigate the impact on them. Now, Lady Wilcox, you will know about the when it is appropriate and not appropriate to use reserves, and using reserves to run is something that, you know, is not advisable. So
When they're gone, they're gone.
when they're gone, they're gone. So
You can't fund, you can't fund stuff from reserves.
no, so we've opted to stick with that, and we are not funding any ongoing costs of running from reserves. We have instead decided to use reserves to invest in key tangible projects for ourselves, as I said, DICE, sustainability and contamination project to improve things for our people within our service. So underneath there, I provide a reserve table, and as you can see, there's a reducing picture on reserves, and it even looks like as if we're going to be spending 10 million in the next 3 years on our reserves. So there's a naturally depleting picture there.
Yeah.
The more we invest and the more we spend from reserves. And then it goes on to talk about population changes, and I think this is important to note in terms of even if there was no increase in the budget. There's still going to be increases and decreases in local individual councils' fire levies. So given the population changes for Newport and Cardiff, they would, without an increase, be paying more just because of the movements in population and the proportion of the overall budget for the 10 area being bigger for those two authorities. So I provide another table there setting out what the individual increases potentially look like for them for 2005-06, and that increase in absolutes is 5.5 million. I go on to talk about, I summarise the risks, as I've mentioned throughout the report, and they're there in 2.81, and finally touch on the 5.75 increase in the contribution budget. And just I wanted to draw back your attention to that's 5.75. Average settlement is 4.3. If we hadn't had the NIC increase of 1.7, we would have been under average settlement. And we know that support is going to be provided to local authorities for the national insurance uplift. And the advice from the Cabinet Secretary has been for this to be included in fire levies, as it will be passported through to councils, which will come through to us.
Yeah, thank you very much, Lisa. It's a very detailed paper. I haven't had a chance to have a look at it in massive detail, although you have kept me informed about the broader picture and the figures and the numbers prior to the creation of this paper, and I thank you for that. It's important that our partners in local government understand why they're being asked for this money. It is, to all intents and purposes, an insurance policy for them, because without us, they wouldn't be able to have that surety and that safety. Some areas pay more than others because there are more people live there. That's easy to understand. And some areas are prone to more difficulties, as we've seen, in recent months, and in terms of, climate change and whatever else is happening. The service has been at the absolute forefront of helping to deal with the emergencies that have arisen both in RCT and in Monmouthshire and in other parts of the area. So in the bigger picture as well, we are a small part of a council's overall budget. It seems like big figures, and they are big figures, but in terms of, what's RCT's budget? About 600 million, is it?
It's around the 400 million now.
400 million now, so there we are. That's a lot of money. So but then he's got a lot to do. There's a lot to run. So, we're asking for percentage-wise, a very small percentage really of the total budget for the council. So, and in terms of the meetings and the engagements and things, how's that going?
So following any agreement that I received from you this afternoon, I'd be drafting a letter as set out in that final table there of, is it 2.73? That's where I would be sending out to contacts, chief execs, treasurers, and political leaders. That would be, if you were of a mind to agree that, that's what we'd be writing out and inviting them to make a comment on. So we'd be looking to keep that consultation open for the month of January. And of course, we've got Board of Commissioners on the 13th of February scheduled to finalise what the budget settlement for next year is going to look like.
Now, because we came in literally days before the 12th of February this year,
Yeah.
what, if any, process would be in place in terms of any comments or observations that we have back from local authorities? Are we able to do any tweaking or?
It would depend what that was,
Right.
really.
Yeah.
We would be looking to publish all responses in the final budget report,
Yeah.
and thank our local authority funders for
Yeah.
being able to contribute in that. We have had comment in previous years,
Yeah.
so we'd be looking to take on board what they say and if realistic, make any changes.
Okay.
But
There is two-way communication, is what I'm
Yes.
getting at.
yes,
Yeah.
yes,
Good. Okay, well, I'm clear about how we've arrived at these figures. I'm clear about what we anticipate they get from Welsh Government and what the demands are and what our demands are in order to provide a safe service for the public in South Wales. So I'm happy to approve this. We've got any further comments from anyone? No? Okay, right, let's move forward and approve. Thank you.
thank you.
So budget setting, item number 8. Yeah. Redevelopment of Newman Fire Station. Yeah.
Yes, so this is a report that is asking Commissioner to ratify the decision made to award the construction contract to Metcalfe. So it's a very brief report discussing the robust procurement process that's been run and that the successful supplier was Metcalfe, and we are looking to continue demolition and construction of the site on this basis.
Okay. I just pick up on paragraph 2.4. So we continue to invest in our property portfolio to ensure stations are fit for purpose, meet the needs of operational crews and so on and so forth. How is that chosen? The investment in property portfolio.
So our process is we've got stock condition survey which points to the deterioration of any assets across the portfolio. So and we do a cost benefit analysis which looks at what is the cost of repairs versus what is the cost of a complete refurb or rebuild. And as you can see from the beginning of that report, this is a very old station, 1950s. I've been around there myself a number of times and it is in need of a refurb. So overlaying that stock condition survey, we do an external sort of valuation process through our valuers. That overlays that and sort of strengthens it to a degree in terms of the value and life expectancy of these assets. So it's on a par with that. This again is overlaid with annual visits by the property teams throughout the year. So Mike will sign off an annual impairment review. So knowing the assets in a more intimate nature, he will do a review of and you know the main pieces. It's been roofs, subsidence, things like that in the past before now, and we've got to sign that off as a matter of our statutory requirements in linked in with the financial reporting. Also, we've got an internal property steering group that aims to pick up the emerging issues of the service. And of course, one of those is contamination, and trying to link in with our main customers, which is operations, in determining what our priorities are. So there's this multiple points of evidence and information that inform our priority on this front. Possibly the only thing that's missing is some kind of operational review then.
Yeah, so that was going to be my next point. Do we ever look at, you know, which stations do we need? The population has moved to here. That, you know, that kind of thing. Chris, you indicate pick up on that?
Chair, I am picking up on that. So part of my role, temporary role, will be looking at a CRMP, so Community Risk Management Plan, or an all school money fire cover review. So it's looking at what our risks are in now South Wales.
Yeah.
Since we last did a review in 2011.
Yeah.
Where are we now? And it'll set the scene of what will our service look like in 10, 20, 30 years time.
Yeah,
So where do we build fire stations or stations of the future?
yeah.
So we'll be embarking on that this year.
Good, because as you can imagine, as a former local authority leader, we did that particularly with schools. You know, schools were very much part of our, do we need to keep that infant school open, you know, can those schools be amalgamated? It's that, so that's the model I'm coming from, to look at what happens in fire.
Yes, we will base all that on risk. So what does South Wales risk now look like? Because the environment's changing exponentially,
Yes,
certainly in terms of building type. Where
yes,
we build, industry is changing, risk
Yeah.
is changing. So the CRMP will give us a guidance of what that will look like in the
and
future.
CRMP, sorry,
Community Risk Management Plan.
okay, thank you,
So a service-wide community risk management plan,
right, okay. So we may be doing things differently in the future.
possibly.
And you wouldn't expect me not to pick up the spending mistake, would you? On
No.
page 25, recommendations spelt incorrectly, okay? It's 2 M's and 1 C. Sorry, can't help it. You shouldn't give me these things. It's too tempting. Okay, thank you for that then, Lisa. Thanks, Chris, for the extra information. So that's noted. Let's move on then to agenda item 9. The Treasury Management Midterm Report. Lisa, over to you again, please.
Thank you, Lady Wilcox. This is the second of 3 statutory Treasury Management reports that you'll receive in the financial year. So you've had the Treasury Management Strategy Statement
Yeah.
last March. This is the second report which provides update on the first 6 months of the financial year. So that's the 1st of April to the 30th of September. So as we know, Treasury Management is about managing our money to ensure it is safe, available when we need it, and it is used wisely. So the 2 aspects of Treasury Management that impact our work really are about ensuring liquidity. So that's being able to pay bills when they fall due, in a nutshell. And the other aspect of our Treasury Management work is funding capital investment, because you'll be aware that we receive no financial settlement from Welsh Government for capital,
Yeah.
or from our local authority funders. It is all funded through borrowing, capital receipts and grants, and a small £200,000 contribution from revenue budget every year.
Although to be fair to Welsh Government, and I'm not always fair to them, they haven't had money for years. This is the first year,
They
for years
haven't.
and years and years, that they've had some capital funding from Whitehall.
Yes. So in doing those things, liquidity and capital investment, we have a mind for risk and also the impact that those activities have on our revenue budget. So it's about mitigating the cost of those activities. So to help us do this, the Treasury Management strategy sets out a framework within which officers will work.
Yeah.
And this sets out a number of indicators, limits, thresholds, and policies for borrowing, investment, and various bits and pieces there. So the key things in 3.1, the table there that highlights is capital expenditure, capital investment. That's a key indicator, and that drives lots of our Treasury Management work, or otherwise known as CapEx. The capital financing requirement, or CFR, is denoted there. Borrowing, that's another indicator, and then whether we are under or over borrowed. And what that means is it looks at our capital financing requirement. What's our borrowing position? Are we more or less than that? Because CFR is the hard limit that sort of indicates that if we are over borrowed, so we've gone above that limit, potentially we need to look at how long we are doing that, because that could be a sign of borrowing to run, and we don't borrow to run.
Mm.
That's what our fire levies do.
Yeah.
We borrow to invest.
Yeah.
So it's making sure that any borrowing is for capital purposes only.
Yeah.
We are currently under borrowed by 17 million, and what that largely means for us is that we've got a number of assets on our balance sheet that we have funded through internal reserves.
Okay.
So we've yet to secure borrowing on them.
Yeah.
And that's been a good strategy. It's worked well for us
Yeah.
for a number of years, because what that does is it negates the cost of borrowing
Yes.
in our revenue budget.
Yeah.
So where we finding ourselves at the minute now is that we do need to borrow, and borrowing rates are quite high at the moment.
Mm.
So
Something came out today. I haven't heard it yet. Was it?
no, it's after 12.
After 12,
Monetary Policy Committee will
Yeah.
put their information out.
Yeah.
So I think it's doubtful that they're going to do anything with bank rate.
Yeah.
I think inflation has crept up again, so it was 1.7 at
Yeah.
the beginning of the last quarter for the year. It's gone up to 2.3, and the projections are that that's going to increase to 2.7. So with inflation rising, what you're not going to get is that reduction in the Bank of England interest rate,
Yeah.
because
I'm sure Rachel Reeves is
Yeah.
delighted at those figures. Not.
So I think what that means for us is we'd like to hold on as long as we possibly can to borrow, because
Yes.
of course we want rates to come down.
Yes. Yes.
But if they don't, I know we reach a pinch point after Christmas, so
Yeah.
that, the first quarter of the new financial year.
Yeah.
And if we have to borrow then, which I think we will,
Yeah.
we'll be borrowing short, so we don't lock into high rates long term.
Got it.
So we'll
Yeah.
get it'll be a reducing sort of like a less than 5-year picture for any borrowing.
Yes.
And then we look to refinance then when rates are better, and we'll be locking into that in a longer term and in
Yes.
line with a maturity profile.
Yes. Good. Good. So we're not
Um,
risking anything here.
Yes. So I think even though we've talked about inflation and interest, the long-term trajectory for bank rate is declining. So that sort of forms our view and our strategy for borrowing. And that provides us with an update. And just to say that none of the limits set out in the Treasury Management Strategy, so operational boundaries for borrowing, authorised limits, affordability, and all the rates and the policies there, nothing has been breached. Nothing looks like it's going to be breached. And the report also gives some information there on interest costs, interest paid,
Yeah.
our loan portfolio
Yeah.
as a macro and a micro picture. And that's it really.
Yeah.
It's just giving you the view of where we've been the last 6 months.
And it's all there in black and white and in the public domain, so that everyone can see it, and that we can be assured that we are absolutely following prudential
Yes.
codes.
Yes, and the thing with the Prudential Code is that there's no hard and fast limits for borrowing. It's very much determined by your capital investment plans.
Okay.
So whatever they tell us we're going to do,
Yeah.
there's a series of calculations, and all the limits I previously mentioned, they're all interlinked, and they form a framework within which you arrive at a borrowing limit.
Yeah.
So, they will be different. Borrowing limits will be different for every organisation.
Yes.
And also they'll be different for the same organisation in different years.
Yes.
Because the plans will alter.
Yes. Yes. No, that's a very important point. And of course, it's our statutory duty, isn't it,
Yes.
to keep all this under review. Is there anything that we need to be aware of, Lisa?
Nothing. No limits breached, no policies need to be adjusted. We've had an update with Link, or our specialist advisors, and we've got a catch up due in the new year to have a look at our borrowing position and what the impact of that is.
Good.
I would like to have seen today's announcements from the Bank of England to say that bank rates are coming down. I think it's very unlikely, but we'll
Static.
Staying the same.
yeah, they were staying the same.
That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I thought
that's what it looks like.
I thought as much. There we are. Don't rock the boat at the moment. Don't measure and waspy. It's all very difficult, I can tell you. Okay, thank you so much, Lisa. Thank you for this. Thank you for the hard work that is entailed in getting this sorted. Are there any comments from colleagues, please? No? Okay. Right, so that's noted. Thank you. Let's move on to item 10, internal audit update. Still with you, Lisa.
So I'm going to introduce my colleague, Senior Procurement Officer Lee Buncombe. He's picked up some internal work for me the last 6 months. Lee, over to you.
So, yeah, thanks, Liz. So within this audit report, we've got 4 papers going to report to this committee. 2 of those are from last year's audit plan, 2 are from the current year audit plan. Those being ICT data assurance, state reporting compliance, capital planning, communications. Steen from TIAA will take us through the key findings of each of those reports. Over to you, Steen.
So if I can begin with the ICT data assurance, I'll take all the reports as read and just give you some of the highlights, if that's okay. So the first one is reasonable assurance, 2 important and 4 routine recommendations. The 2 important recommendations, the first is relating to update of policies. Some of the technology that the service uses changed, but the policies haven't been updated to reflect those, so there's a need to do that. And at the time also the same with the privacy policy, that needed to be updated at the same time. So I'll stop there and take any questions on this particular report.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I have looked at these in some detail, Steen, and I've got more comments to make on later reports. I've got fewer comments on this one, but you know, we haven't got anything red in this one, so that didn't, you know, let off the issues. But are you within this report? Can you tell me if there are any areas that are moving towards concerns as our external auditor?
Yeah, no significant concerns as it shows really. It's reasonable assurance. The 2 recommendations, although noted as important, they are kind of tidying up of policies, if you like. The policies do exist, but it's updating those to reflect current practices. So I don't think there's any major concerns in this particular area, no.
Okay, thank you. So I guess we move on to the next one.
Yeah, so the next one is capital planning.
Yeah.
Lisa's report is an example of some of the controls in place. This one is substantial assurance, just 1 routine recommendation, again relating to policy. So financial procedure rules need to be updated with the new structure with the commissioners, and some changes within the finance team as well. But other than that, all of the expected controls we would hope to see. So the development of the capital programme, the ongoing reporting, the liaison with budget holders responsible for capital, all of those elements were taking place. So again, no major concerns and a substantial assurance overall.
Okay, good. And our next one then is the assurance review of estates strategy and property compliance, where we do have a red.
Yeah, so this one is limited assurance. We don't often give limited assurance for the service, but unfortunately this time around we did. Obviously, it's based on the work that we've undertaken. So we were looking at the property compliance, so that's elements such as fire risk assessments, gas, Legionella, electrical safety, lift installations. So those types of areas we're looking at, accuracy of data held, and evidence of inspections being completed and certificates held, those types of things. I think overall the big picture was there was a lot of inconsistency in terms of record keeping, both in terms of data, but also some of the inspection certificates as well. And that's reflected in the recommendations there. As you say, 1 urgent recommendation in particular relating to inspection certificates and retaining those. I'll stop there and take any questions if that's okay.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm just going back to other pages in the report there. Because obviously this one did cause me concern because it's a red. So if the team could tell me about further implementation of this, because you know this is a concern for us. Who's in charge of it? When's it going to be done? What are the timescales? You know, these things have to be recorded, so we can't go over the fact that they weren't. But I would expect it now to be tightened up. So what's happening, please?
So, Lady Wilcox, I've got overall responsibility for property. and we've been looking at this issue. So we've been aware of this for quite some time. This is we've had some change in the facilities team. So we lost quite a lot of experience and expertise, and I think this is a symptom of that position. We've got some temporary resource there, and we're looking to bolster and firm that up. And I will just hand you over to Mike, who will take you through some detailed points of the plan that we're going to put in place to rectify this.
So we were already actually working on the plan before the audit took place. So some of the work had gone ahead at the time. So historically, all of this information was stored in spreadsheets and files are quite difficult to track back on anything and find things quickly. So one of the team members has been working for a few months now, setting up a SharePoint on our intranet where all the information is centrally held. So if you go onto our property page now, you're able to access all of the documents that are mentioned in the report instantly, and everything will be updated as they come in. So they're going to meet bi-monthly from now until we're content that this measure is ready to be signed off. So every month they'll meet. Every 2 months they will meet just to go through all the certificates that have come in, to make sure all the dates and everything are in order. There was an issue picked up with some certificates were coming in without signatures. So simple things really that they need to tighten up on. So they're all aware of this and are working to kind of make that correct. But also we're looking at potentially going out to the market to source a compliance system, because we've spoken to other services to see how they are dealing with this matter after we've seen this report. So I had a meeting with North Wales about a fortnight ago, so they've already got a system in place and they're currently looking to upgrade that system. So they're already streets ahead of us in that. So this is something that I'm actively working on. We've actually engaged with a company externally and had a demonstration of what some software could look like on that. So I'm working with procurement shortly to kind of go out to the market to see what sort of systems are available to assist us in this as well.
Okay, because, you know, it's a stark note in the report
It is.
that compliance certificates for 108 out of 140 certificates requested were unable to be located. You know, I do not expect to see those numbers again.
Absolutely.
There are no established KPIs related to property compliance, which would in place support the estate property team to monitor and take action. So, you know, are we looking at KPIs?
Yeah, the KPIs would be based around the findings of this report as well, is trying to manage our contractors on the testing dates at the moment. I think there was a section that picked up on the fact that some certificates had been provided, but were maybe later than they should have been. So we'll be using that as a form to manage the contractors going forward.
So these are areas of concern, but we're on it.
Yes.
And things will be improved. Yes?
Absolutely.
Lucas, if I may, so I'll take full accountability from this point forward in my new role for corporate support. So I'll support Mike and Lisa to ensure that we do make progress on this and give them the support needed.
So you'll be the one I'll be coming after.
Yes.
Good. Thank you. Thank you all. Thanks very much. And we've got the next one then, the review of communications scheme, yeah?
Yeah, so this one is reasonable assurance, part of the 24-25 programme. The two recommendations, there's two important and two routine recommendations. The two important recommendations relate to update of the communications strategy, and make sure that's monitored and reported, and again, performance indicators around delivery of the communications strategy as the other important recommendation. But also some good practice notice, so called silver bronze media planning approach. I think lots of the organisations we work with get a lot of requests to their communications team to do things. Can you send us it? Can you post this? Often the prioritisation of that gets a little bit lost and confused. So it's good that that kind of methodology is in place.
Yeah, good. Well, now we've got our new head of communications and engagement in place. We would expect that this area of the work to be sharpened up and focused. My question is the implementation timetable. devising a new comms and engagement strategy, implementation timetable, the 30th of June next year. I would be expecting that to be earlier if needed. I think that's a very long run in, you know. I don't think anyone should need 6 months. I mean, 3 months at a push, I would say. So how can we translate that? Dominic?
Yes, and sorry, I've had a meeting this morning with our head of comms. She's got a rather robust plan to be put pretty quickly for a 30, 60, 90-day priorities. The strategy and the development of that will be part of that. It also forms part of our communication and engagement with the project. So planning to do that is always already in place. I think there is an aspiration as part of our wider strategy development piece that we have those in place with our organisational priorities for next year and our KPIs across the board for the service, and ELT's has a discussion. So I anticipate.
Yeah.
I'll take some accountability on this one as well, because I participated in this audit as part of the handover.
Yeah.
The length of that implementation as well. In the recommendation, it talks about effective monitoring and review as well.
Yeah.
So it wouldn't just be a case of publishing and launching the strategy, but it was building in a few months of actually undertaking that. Is the reviewing and busting the KPIs in place as well? So just adding that time to give assurance that it's not just in place, but we're actually undertaking that work to ensure that it's progressing at the right speed. So the timelines appear long, but the launch would obviously be front loading that action. I think the main part is maintaining momentum significantly before setting off. So I think that.
I want things done sooner. Okay, that's my message. And the other findings. I was interested to see the number of posts we have in media and communications. 9 comms and then 2 translators. And the translator team, are they on site, or are they people we buy in?
They're employed by the service, but they are home working. They work from home. I think the nature of the work they do lends itself very well to being in an isolated environment for concentration purposes. But they are employed by us. Okay,
so I just thought 9 was a large. I didn't realise we had as many as that. Okay, have I got anything else to pick up on here? I said when, so yeah. So you've given me whens. That's what I need to do. And the implications then, Sven, a mandatory response is required from management outlining how, when, and who is responsible for improvements arising. So I said, yes, we need a list of dates and who's in charge of them. Yeah, I think I've made that quite clear individually. So are you happy with that, Stephen? And I've set out what needs to be done, who needs to be doing it, and when it needs to be done by. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Lady Wilcox. Just to update, you will have seen in the progress report, we also follow up on the recommendations on an annual basis to make sure they're implemented as well, and we bring a report back to the committee on that as well.
Yeah. Thank you so much, and thank you for looking from the outside in, because that's very, very helpful indeed. Okay, so let's note that, and let's move on to item number 11. Performance report. Dean, I think that's you. Yeah.
Thank you, Lady Wilcox.
Thank you.
So yes, this is a follow-up report. Is to combine Q1 and Q2 performance data. So this relates to the 7 strategic performance indicators for the service.
Yeah.
So this is allows us to comply with the legislative requirement for us to report on these 7 indicators through commissioners and also through the public-facing elements of the service. As I've discussed before, with the 7 indicators, they've broken down into 3 different categories. The first 4 being incident-based indicators, and then the next 2 relate to fatality and injury indicators. And the last one is an effective response indicator, and that one particularly aligns to the operational effectiveness thematic review that Mike Evans was giving us a presentation on this morning.
Yes.
Which talks around effective operational response. So in terms of highlights, if I could draw your attention to page 112, and this is a table providing some data in around 7 indicators. So we've got the 7 performance indicators just listed on the left-hand side there. Then the first column gives us the Q1 and 2 performance of the previous year. Then this current year's data, and then the third column along gives us a projection of where I'd anticipated those targets were to be at this point of view. And then obviously the last column right at the end, you can see that we've got 5 stars, which means we're better than equal to the projection that we'd anticipated. And then we've got 2 indicators, one being the false alarms attended, which is being addressed through the
change in the
AFA policy.
Yeah.
And the second one is the total RDCs attended, which is slightly increased based on the projection. So in the page 113, I'll just give you some of the highlights from those 7 indicators. So page 113 gives us the indicator for total fires. What you can see from this one is reduced by 28% compared on last year, which is really pleasing to note.
Yeah.
And in particular, what you'll find from the column on the right there, just in summary, it'll show that all causes of fires there, in terms of accidental fires, deliberate fires, etc., they've all reduced compared to this time last year, which is really, really pleasing. I think that's in comparison to probably some of the activity that our local stations have been undertaking, the community safety department as well, in terms of the education and the activities that we do outside just to educate people. On page 114, we've then got another 2 indicators. First one being the false alarms attended, and as I just mentioned, that one has gone up, but that's going to be addressed through obviously the change in policy start of January. At the bottom of page 44, then we've got total RTCs attended. This one has slightly increased. The pleasing things from this indicator will be that although we've had more RTCs, the amount of extrication, so the mechanical intervention of actually cutting vehicles to remove people out, has actually reduced by 17%, which would indicate that probably lots of these incidents are probably slower impacts, which might relate and probably provide the argument in terms of the 30 to 20 changes that we're starting to see around South Wales. From a statistical perspective, what Wayne's team's doing is trying to gather the data from South Wales Police and Welsh Government to probably provide that bit of context in around the 30 to 20 changes.
Yeah.
On page 45, then we've got 2 more indicators. I missed page 115. Oh, you've got different page numbers to be. Apologies.
No, it's okay.
So page 115 relates to other special service calls attended. What you'll see from this one, it's gone down by 6% again, which is really pleasing.
Yeah.
The only things that have risen there, it's flooding incidents up by 11%.
That's where we're at with it, Dean. It's what I referred to earlier, you know, when talking about what the service has been doing recently with RCT. I mean, I think we're going to see that, aren't we? Climate change, it's inevitable. So with that inevitability, how are we going to manage it? Are we looking at how we change things because the world is changing? Yeah, pretty much. I know Chris is here, and it might be an opportune time for Chris to just give us a bit of an update really on the water strategy, because Chris has been leading on behalf of the service.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. So thanks, Steve Wilcox. So firstly, we learned from our lessons for flooding. I mean, and like you rightly said, climate change is with us. And we've seen that through the years. So in particular, 2020 was a big year for us. So we had Storm Dennis.
Yes,
so
that's when Taft Street was.
That's when we had the first sort of really big
wasn't it?
implication for our service. And as an organisation, I would say we struggled to maintain our service delivery for water rescue to the point where we lent on national resilience, where we had Surf Life Saving Wales and many organisations helping us in time of need.
Right.
Go back a couple of years before that, as you will be aware that in 2017, statutory duty for water rescue and flooding is now sat with us as an organisation in Wales. And there's a difference between us and England, but we have a statutory duty.
Yeah.
So those 2 things, we took a review on where we were with water rescue strategy. We're in the final stages of that strategy now, whereby we've got more crews with more PPE skill sets to allow us to be able to maintain a position at protracted incidents such as flooding. So to give you an example, on Storm Bert and Storm Dara, we didn't need to lean on any other organisation to call in for national resilience. However, we did use voluntary sector to help us out in certain areas. But what it allowed us to do, the water rescue strategy, is allowed us to spend more time in that environment without our crews getting contaminated with their fire kit. So they've got specialist dry suits on now.
Yeah.
We've got more widespread skill sets in the service where we are now. Now, what we need to do is review where we were with Storm Bert and Storm Dara to make sure evaluation wise that actually boots on the ground happened,
Yes.
and then to reevaluate that to the next position. But our investment in the last 5 years has paid dividends in terms of our response. So we've had a proper test. So to answer your question, climate change is with us. We responded back in Storm Dennis. We're now in a different position for water rescue, but we need to keep reviewing that because the picture is changing. Working with our both LRFs, so local resilient forums, it's very, very clear that South Wales will be hit quite hard. And the prediction for 2050 is that there will be areas of Cardiff that will see flooding that they've never seen before.
Yes.
And in Newport. So we are moving towards that. And that links in with the CRMP, Community Risk Management Plan.
No, I know, the Crinder area of Newport is always,
Yeah.
we would be, I'd get that phone call at 11 o'clock at night, getting people out then. And the, the park, the residential, the caravan park, getting them away from the,
Skill set wise, where we are as rescue, that performance part, we're there. The learning for us now, what our next stage is preparedness. So it's not just about preparedness of where we are as an organisation, preparedness of where we are as organisations, but also about understanding where vulnerable people are. Because the lessons that learned from Dennis, the lessons that we learned from Bert and Dara is identifying where those vulnerable people are within floodplains.
I can't see, those houses, there's the bridge in Ponty and those houses down there, that's just such a risk. Sorry, Brian, you wanted to come.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thanks, Lady Wilcox. So we're going to set ourselves up for failure if we keep having a downward trend predicted for this specific. So to answer a specific question around what we can do, we need to analyse the data we've had over the last 5 years and then predict an average increase in the calls and just say we're going to see growth in this area. Otherwise, we're going to constantly set ourselves up for a failure within a specific KPI.
And just, and be realistic that these changes, are wrought upon us. So therefore we need to be, ready for what we need to do in the future. But I mean, that's very good news to hear that stuff put in years ago,
Definitely.
has made us match fit, as it were, for this.
Like Brian said, Wilcox, that is predicted to go up. So we need to set the bar correct for our organisation. Otherwise, we'll be sat here time and time again looking at red arrows going up. But it's an understanding that as an environment now, that is the change is happening. It's inevitable.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, so Dean. Okay,
thank you, Lady Wilcox. So on top of page 115, we just talked about the special service goals, talk about flooding. Water rescues has come down. So even though the flooding incidents has risen, the water rescues has come down. Also, what's coming down is assisting other agencies, which is really key at the moment, and that's probably through lots of discussions that we're having with various stakeholders. The calls originating from the ambulance service slightly risen by 3% compared to last year. So we are collecting data from operational crews where WAST have asked us to mobilise to an incident. So we're sharing that information in around, are they actually in attendance, etc., so that we can chase that up through WAST themselves. Bottom of page 115, then we've got the indicator on total fatalities and injuries. You'll see from the data there that fatalities and injuries has increased by 1. However, we only had 1 fatality in these 2 quarters compared to 2 in the same quarters of last year. The only thing that's gone up were the slight injuries. Page 116, then we've got total accidental fatalities and injuries. And there's a slight increase there as well. In terms of the last indicator, and this is the one that's from a Welsh Government perspective in terms of the percentage of dwelling fires contained in room of origin. You will see from the data there on the graph over the last 5 years, this is the first time where we've actually gone above the projection to 85.7%.
Yeah.
So out of all the performance indicators, the one where we want a higher number.
Yeah.
In terms of the data for this one, just to give you a little bit of context, out of the incidents over the 6-month period for these types of fires, we've attended 307 dwelling fires. Out of those 307, 263 were confined to the room of origin. That leaves 44. 37 of those, upon our attendance, are already spread beyond the room of origin. So that leaves 7 incidents. So there's 300 we've accounted for. 7 since we've been in attendance, we've said is then spread beyond the room of origin. Out of those 7, through Wayne's teams, I've asked for a detailed account of each of those 7 incidents. That's where the rich learning will come.
Yeah, to see if there's any kind of,
Absolutely, yeah.
any kind of
And
information.
I've shared that information with Mike Evans in terms of the project that he's undertaking. From those 7 incidents, what it showed us is that one of those has been recategorized.
Yeah.
To it stayed within the room of origin, so that leaves 6. 2 other incidents were recorded as spreading within the room of origin, but the stop message from the crews actually indicated it was out on arrival and they've only inspected, which didn't line up. So we've gone back and they've both been changed.
Okay.
So it actually leaves 4 incidents out of 307 that while we've been in attendance is spread beyond the room of origin. So Mike is looking at the actual tactics we employed there.
Okay.
What was the fire loading, etc.
Yeah.
Open plan living, just to give us that better
Yeah.
understanding of context.
Yes. Yes. Good. Well, good, because that reflection is needed. But overall, those figures are very small, aren't they?
Very small. Yeah.
Compared to how well you've done with the vast majority. So so that's excellent. Thank you.
That covers all the indicators there. Thank you, Wilcox.
Okay. Well, I think we've talked through that. I don't have anything more to add. But it's important to pick up those points. Just the one thing about mentioned about getting the data for the 20 mile an hour and 30 mile an hour. I mean, I think that would be very good if we could get as much evidence-based data on that as possible, because it is an area of contention, and for me personally, I believe the speed reduction is a good thing, but it's trying to get that across to the general public, isn't it? That it's not all about going slow; it's about being safe. So I don't know if we can get more data, or there's a possibility on it, because we're the service that the government would depend upon to give them the answers that they need. So there we are. Anyway, so that's that noted. Let's move on then to item 12, Auditor General's Governance of Fire and Rescue Authorities report and the authorities' management response. So before I hand over, it's Wayne, I think, is this, yes?
It's me, yeah.
So if I just make the comments in terms of the commissioners, okay? So for the record, and it's quite a long statement, so Catherine, bear with me. So the commissioners acknowledge the recommendations outlined within the Auditor General's report on governance and fire rescue authorities, noting that the study began before the Welsh Government's intervention and their appointment to South Wales Fire and Rescue Service. The commissioners recognise that reform of fire and rescue service governance is a major policy initiative being led by Welsh Government, who is seeking input from all relevant stakeholders. The commissioners will continue to work closely with Welsh Government in accordance with our terms of reference and bringing our insight into governance of a fire and rescue service to support the development of proposals for future governance arrangements. An appropriate reformed governance mechanism, which will support the continued and sustained recovery within South Wales Fire and Rescue Service, will need to be put in place before the commissioners will be able to discharge their terms of reference and recommend conclusion of the Welsh Government intervention. Catherine, I've got that. If you thank you. But for the record, it needs to be read out. Okay. Wayne, and I found another spelling mistake. See on page 117, this report is for information. Report approved by temporary head of corporate right? That's spelled incorrectly and it's spelled correctly then underneath. Don't give an English teacher spelling mistakes. Okay? Yeah, you do know how to spell it. So I'm just, it's, you think giving her a report with spelling mistakes, should have figured out. No, there you go. There you go. But in terms of public documents, things are going to be correct. Okay, so please, over to you.
Yeah, just a quick overview from me before I pass over to Audit Wales. So as you mentioned just now, this is the a summary report of the Auditor General's governance of fire and rescue authorities. And obviously there's an authorities management response in place. So yeah, because I put a quick paper together. Obviously the report was published by Audit Wales in September 24, assessing the governance of the fire and rescue authorities. What I've done in the overview paper is I've just included the key considerations outlined within the report and some of the main recommendations that have been included in there that ensure that weaknesses in the current governance model could be addressed. I have mentioned in the paper that obviously the report does acknowledge that there has been a change in governance since the start of the audit. And again, a few weeks after the report was published, we provided a management response to the necessary recommendations for us as an authority. The main one was around the induction and ongoing training of authority members. It talks around their roles and their understanding of fire and rescue service business. So the management response is relatively brief, where we just acknowledge that for any future governance arrangements, there will be an onboarding, quite a thorough induction, and obviously then there'll be ongoing training needs depending on type of issues and the type of papers facing that authority for decision. But I'm happy to hand over at this point. I think it's going to be Timothy on screen.
Okay, well, just before I hand over to Timothy, clearly the commissioners have noted the content of the report and noted that the management response form can only be limited in nature due to the extraordinary position of the South Wales Fire and Rescue Service with the commissioners in governance. And this is about future member development until the commissioners stand down. So, Timothy Buckley, you are very welcome to our meeting. Can I ask you to comment on anything you've heard so far, please?
Thank you, Lady Wilcox. Yes, I'll just move on to talk a little bit more about the report, but I won't go into great detail. Obviously, you've all got the report, and I think, as Wayne mentioned, the summary report kind of identifies the main issues anyway. Just a few things, I think, just to place in context. So this was part 2 of 2 local government studies we undertook. The first of which was looking at governance of national park authorities, which we published in April 2024. So just to let the committee know about that and be aware of that. So there is obviously some crossover, but they were separate projects, but essentially looking at a very similar territory in looking at the governance of special purpose authorities. The methodology we used for the work is set out in the appendix. So again, I won't go into that line by line, but it involved extensive document reviews, quite a few local interviews with Fire and Rescue Authority members and officers. We also conducted national interviews, and as you'll be aware, we met with the commissioners as well towards the latter stage of the review also, as well as a survey of senior officers and Fire Authority members, and we also observed 16 meetings, or formal meetings, I should say, across the 3 FRAs. So just to highlight the evidence base that we drew on. The main findings are set out in the covering report anyway, so again, I won't read them line by line, but we talked about roles and responsibilities being clear on paper in a sense, but not always demonstrated in practice. Within the text of the report in that section, we talk about some concerns that were fed back to us about there being an inherent tension between the role of elected members as elected members of local authorities, but then also on the Fire and Rescue Authority, and also the observation that sometimes members focus on parochial considerations rather than the Fire and Rescue Authority area as a whole. So those were the 2 things, I think, which explain the finding we arrived at in terms of roles and responsibilities not always being clear in practice.
Can I cut across you and say, as a former leader of a local authority and of the WLGA, it would be very unusual for any councillor not to be parochial. It's always about, them talking about their individual patch on whatever the topic is, or whatever the matter is. So I'm not at all surprised by that finding. And I don't know how we change it, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah, okay, thanks. Yeah, I mean, obviously that's based partly on what we were told through the interviews and what we observed as well in some circumstances. But yeah, absolutely. I think how our recommendations I'll come on to, obviously, in terms of how we think that there's action could be taken. But yeah, recognise the point, absolutely. The second part that we talked about was around the governance model and the membership, and how that recognises the importance of community representation, but not necessarily reflects the specialist nature of the Fire and Rescue Authority functions. And we also drew attention to the lack of evaluation of the contribution of Fire and Rescue Authority members, and as well as that lack of evaluation in terms of accountability, but also then how that doesn't then or can't then feed into training and development as well, because of the evaluation could also support that. A number of points within that section, which we identified as potentially or as limiting the ability of fire and rescue authorities within the governance model to address that potential weakness, which was the size of the membership, the rate of turnover, which makes training and development more challenging. We observed a lack of scrutiny in formal meetings, which again is not always clear or obvious in terms of cause and effect, but that could be a consequence of the difficulties around training and development and lack of specialist knowledge. I've talked about the lack of evaluation of member contributions already. We also, through our evidence gathering, observed a variance in the extent to which specialist knowledge of elected members is considered when nominating them from local authorities as well. And one of the consequences of the model as well is a lack of diversity in Fire and Rescue Authority membership. So we also highlighted that as well. And the last point on that was around, I think, some of the attempts to address some of the issues identified was use of, for example, smaller working groups or similar things, but then that then has a knock-on potentially around lack of transparency of governance as well. So we've talked a bit about that in the report too. So the next section was around compliance with code of conduct. And we highlighted overall, generally, that was a positive picture, that generally members seem to behave in and observe code of conduct and behave in a way that would be appropriate. There were one or two exceptions we highlighted, not specific examples, but where we were kind of brought to our examples were brought to our attention, but overall that was a positive picture. And then the last section is about review of governance arrangements. So we recognise that fire and rescue authorities do review their arrangements, mainly through the annual governance statement process, and also identified some examples of additional review of particular parts of arrangements within authorities. But under that section of review, we also noted Welsh Government's view in 2018 in the White Paper, and as a factual statement, and I suppose we just highlighted that those proposals weren't taken forward. So clearly Welsh Government at that time felt there were weaknesses in the model. And then of particular relevance to this authority, we also note then as a factual observation the intervention in South Wales Fire and Rescue Authority, and clearly that followed the publication of the Culture Review report as well. And then the two recommendations, again, they're in the report. I won't read them line by line, but one of them is for Welsh Government to review the model and whether it's fit for purpose in a sense, and whether there are opportunities to improve the model to address the weaknesses. And the second one is around, as Wayne said, training and development from fire and rescue authorities, and using the evaluating the contribution of members, and using that again to inform that development would be part of that, we would assume. So I think that was all I had to say. Obviously, we're happy to take any questions on the report or any of the methodology and so on that we use to inform the findings.
Thank you very much, Tim. It's a very comprehensive report, very timely. We've clearly, read it in detail and taken it on board, and we hope that that once the Commissioner's time comes to an end, we will have provided enough evidence for future governance arrangements, both here and perhaps for Welsh Government to look at it on a Wales-wide basis. That's certainly our intention as we move towards our exit strategy. So I don't know if there's any comments from any other colleagues on it. Yeah? No. Well, in that case, the Commissioners note the content of the Governance of Fire and Rescue Authorities report presented by Audit Wales, and we note our authority's management response to the recommendations. And thank you very much for the comments and for attending our meeting today. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Okay, so let's move to our forward work programme then, and that's Gabrielle, please.
Yes, so you'll see all the items on the agenda have been discussed today, and then I've got another meeting scheduled for March, so it's a lot of the recurring reports that we've got to do then, as well as the Treasury strategy statement.
Okay, yes. I don't think there's anything to add on there. That's all very straightforward. Lisa, have you got any
Yeah, there was just part of the recurring reports that we've been missing off the budget monitoring report. So in March, you're going to have, you know, your capital, your revenue monitoring reports to come through as part of a precursor to a financial year end and seeing what our final position is for the year financially.
Okay, so we need to add that.
Yeah, you do.
To the forward work programme. Okay, so that's duly noted. Okay, so we come to our last item of business, and I really enjoy getting in. It's an hour and a half of this meeting, and I'll do it in an hour and 20, which is perfect for me. The only item of business really is, and I should have mentioned this at the beginning, is obviously to send our condolences to the Chief Fire Officer with his recent family bereavement, and of course to note for Dean as well. So we are very sorry to hear that, and you know, a terrible time of year for these things to happen as well. So our best wishes to both Dean and to Finn on their family situations. And I declare the meeting closed.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's on the 20th, yeah.